Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hey everyone, it's Jory Rose. For today's interview, I am bringing you the last interview that John and I gave each other for our Surviving to Thriving Summit. John Schinnerer is my fiancé and host of the podcast, The Evolved Caveman, and he talks about the man box culture and shares how men are socialized to really not understand their emotional landscape and the effect it has on their relationships. And I continue to talk about mindfulness and really how to use these tools in parenting and relationships. I hope you've enjoyed the extra interviews from our summit. And if you want more information, you can go to the show notes and find it there. Hope you enjoyed today's show. I know for us, this was really a huge passion project that we were able to manifest so beautifully because we had such amazing speakers and such beautiful reception of the tools. We got so much wonderful feedback. So just again, thanks you guys for making it through to the end. And we really had a blast with these in conversations and interviews. What were some of your favorites, John?
I think two of my highlights were Dan Tomasolo about hope, because it's just so relevant to right now. And the other one was Vic Strecker and purpose and meaning, which I think, again, if you don't have it, you need it.
Yeah, I agree. That Dan Tomasolo interview, I feel like something every single one of my clients I'm going to have listened to. Because no matter where you are, no matter what you've got going on, to learn how to have hope, to utilize hope as a way of getting out of struggle, it feels like the best possible recipe.
Well, and I love the idea of the opposite of depression isn't happiness. The opposite of depression is hope.
Yeah, absolutely. I think some of my favorites, I always love Corey Muscara. I think, me being the mindfulness person, to have other ways to describe and communicate about how to bring mindfulness into everyday life is something we all need, and something I'm going to talk more about today. One of my favorites is Emily King. I always love talking with her. Her money mindset is so applicable to shifting how we view our relationship to money and our outcomes. And I think especially now at a time of struggle, even more so than ever, to be able to shift from a scarcity or lack mindset to one of abundance.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just listening to that one. It's fantastic.
Yeah. So, we could go through, really every single one, but I think those are some of the ones that really stand out. Oh, and I have to say, Tim Ryan, Congressman Tim Ryan, and, especially all that's happened in the world from the start of our summit to now where we are as we finish it. There has been so much that has changed in our country.
Yeah, who knew? But just in the span of our 30-day summit that we'd be going through the pandemic. Well, we knew that on the outset, but that we'd get into racial unrest, systemic racial oppression, rioting, protesting. It's unlike anything I've ever seen.
It's unlike anything that's ever happened. Yeah. I really, so I think that conversation, if you guys haven't checked out the conversation with Congressman Tim Ryan, more than ever, he has a book titled Healing America. And I think more than ever, his message needs to be heard. And he's so inspirational. And I just feel so inspired to know that there are people in our leadership who are taking such passion to creating long-term systemic change. And it can happen. We both wouldn't be in the business we're in if we didn't believe growth and change was possible. And to now see this macro level, I think when we started the summit, it was these micro levels of how we can grow and change and go from surviving to thriving. But now the conversation seems to be much bigger.
And so one of the things, just to segue, one of the things I want to talk about today is the man box culture and how that leads to how we are socialized as men. And just within the past week, I've been looking at how does the man box culture and how we're socialized as men lead into things like racism and what seems to be a culture of violence and racism in our police organizations.
Can you define a little bit more? I know you've probably said it in other interviews, but to recap what the man box culture means.
Sure. So consider, for those of us who are male, who identify as male, when we're growing up as young boys, think preschool, because this starts really, really early. And, there's a group of boys and one boy likes a little girl in his preschool class, or preschool. And he says, to the other boys, I want to give a flower to Sally. I think she's really pretty. Generally, one boy in the group will say something like, and he's usually the alpha male or the pre-alpha male, and he's got a dad at home that's kind of sharing these lessons. And he said, oh, dude, don't do that. You're such a girl. And from that point on, whatever is feminine or female becomes a put down. And so we start to identify very early that what is feminine is bad or less than. And so the man box culture is really these set of rules that we tend to learn, and
both spoken and unspoken, right?
Right. They're not really they're not generally spoken that often. They're more things that we infer, and they could be from movies, they can be from social media, they can be from friends, they can be from acquaintances, sports coaches, sometimes dads, but not always. But there are rules like, and this was a concept brought up by Paul Kivel. He asked a bunch of middle school and high school males, what does it mean to be a man? And this was about 40 years ago. And the answers were quite similar. It was things like be dominant, be aggressive, dominate women, don't feel, which is one of the big ones to me, be invulnerable, be self-reliant, don't back down. And the way that we kind of learn these rules is, it starts off early in preschool. And then when you get to middle school and high school, if you show too much emotion as a boy, as a teenager, and let's say you show too much sadness or fear, someone around you at some point in time will say something like, dude, don't be such a pussy, don't be a bitch, don't be a little girl, something like that. And understand all those insults are exemplars of the feminine. So immediately from a very young age, we're getting this message that to be female is to be bad. And then on the other side of the coin, you get too much, if you show too much joy, romanticism, love, excitement, someone will say something like, dude, don't be so gay, don't be a fag. Forgive the slurs, but that's what we get growing up. And what happens is then by the time we're a freshman in high school, about the age of 14, two of the primary motivators for us as young men is not to be seen as female and not to be seen as gay. And this evolves and devolves as we get older and older, and it begins to impact our relationships. It begins to impact our relationship with ourselves because we don't know ourselves very well. We don't know even what we're feeling. In fact, Brene Brown, I was just listening to a podcast. She's got 15,000 people in a data set. And the main question she asked is, how many emotions can you name in your body? And the average answer was 3.
Wow.
So that's like good, bad, pissed off. That's tragic.
Wow.
Because if we don't know how we're feeling, we can't, I think we got to get rid of this thing.
Okay.
What do you think? So recently I was listening to a Brene Brown podcast, and she was mentioning that she has a database of 15,000 people. And the main question she asked them was, how many different emotions can you identify in your body?
It'd be interesting as you guys are watching, just think about that for a second before you give the answer, what she gave. I'd be curious for you guys to just pause. Think about how many emotions can you easily name?
Or can you identify what you're feeling right now, today? And
is that enough time?
So without further ado, the answer is that the average was 3.
Wow.
And that's pathetic, honestly. Like, that's good, bad, or pissed off.
And these are adults. These aren't kids.
Adults. Yeah. Wow. And I think that's the way we're socialized as men, definitely. But this was men and women even. And I've seen a study where, women on average can name about 17 emotions, men on 8. But that's just label, like not identifying oneself. That's just in general.
I think that's a really interesting distinction, because you might easily be able to identify it in another person, but have a much harder time knowing when you're experiencing it.
Not even that. It's these. I've memorized 8 emotion words.
Right. But so be able to identify when it's coming up, what am I feeling in my body? And then what do I even do with it? How do I communicate it? How do I manage it?
And so the problem with that is, especially for us men, as we get older, it inhibits how well we know ourselves, our relationship with ourselves. So if we don't even know how we're feeling, how can we even respond to how we're feeling? And that makes us, forgive the term, but I've applied this to myself 30 years ago. It makes us emotional idiots. that we don't have emotional awareness, we don't have emotional literacy. And to me, one of the foundational pillars of a happy, thriving life is emotional awareness, emotional literacy. Because without that, I mean, happiness is primarily an emotional phenomenon. So if you're not aware, if you can't move through that internal landscape of emotion, you're screwed. Yeah. Honestly. And then if you're screwed just in terms of you relating to yourself, how well do you think you're going to relate to your romantic partner, to the other?
And or children, I would say.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's where it starts, I would say, because men, when we're teenagers, like, we don't even care if we're out of touch with ourselves, it doesn't matter that much. I think when we begin to be aware of it and think about it is when we get into a romantic relationship. And then later on we have kids. And so, you know, and I think the vast majority of men in this country, the United States, we don't have much awareness of the emotional landscape. And it's not our fault, but it is our responsibility to learn tools to be better at it. And I want all men out there to be better at it because I want them to be happy and successful. Right. So the problem then going further is it damages our relationship with our loved ones. So, you know, women in this country are responsible for initiating about 75% of the divorces. The biggest complaint I hear from them is, I can't connect with my husband. And, you know, and
I hear the same thing.
Yeah.
And those connections permeate through whether it's just an emotional conversation, a co-parenting situation, whether it's their sex life, their intimacy. I mean, there's layers of the connection that they're struggling with.
Well, what about affairs, or what about porn addiction? And I would say those are symptoms. The underlying cause is the emotional illiteracy, if you will. And so I think it really damages our relationships. And I think women have evolved to the point where they don't need us as much for the financial part of marriage, because most women are out earning their own money, or many. And so what their expectations for a marriage have evolved where they want a lifelong romantic partner, which means they want a husband, a partner who is sympathetic, empathetic, someone that can listen, someone that's supportive, someone that's emotionally aware. And we just haven't been, not only have we not been taught that, we've been humiliated and mocked for dipping our toe in those waters in the past. So it makes sense that we're not there.
Well, and then the challenges that I see with so many couples is when the woman expresses that this is what she's feeling, she then gets shut down because he doesn't have the ability to emotionally connect with his own emotions, to be able to have the empathy for her emotional experience. So she gets then shut down for her expression, which then withdraws the connection even further. I mean, it just perpetuates these cycles of disconnect.
Yeah. And I think it really, it kills me at some level. It hurts me because, you know, I grew up in this culture, the way we're socialized, the man box culture. I know everyone else that I know that's male did also. There's no escaping it. And it to me, it is really damaging for our long-term happiness. I think it even disconnects us from being really satisfied at work at some level, because, you know, I think that we are fed this pipe dream of, you know, make enough money, be successful, be famous enough, be powerful enough, and then you'll be happy. And I really think that everyone on this planet is looking for happiness ultimately, and we go about it in different ways. But I can't tell you how many men I've met that are in their 50s that have done incredibly well in business and have made lots of money and just are miserable. And it's because of this very topic, I would argue.
So what do we do about it?
So the first step, it's a great question. And it's a long answer, but I'll give you the short, the beginning step. And I think the first step is just...
The long answer is work with John and he'll teach you. maybe that was a short answer of the long work ahead.
There's a lot of tools that you can learn to get better at this. And I think the first part is awareness. And the first part is increasing that awareness and kind of getting out of your head, which is where we're rewarded for being, and into your body, which is where emotions reside generally. And I think the foundational tool in my mind is mindfulness, because it helps all of that. Yeah. So let me hand it off to you with that nice segue. Thanks, John.
Sure. I'll take the baton and run with it. But yeah, this is something that one of the reasons that I love the work that John and I do individually is because together, it complements so well. And you guys have probably heard me say this so many times throughout the summit is I really think mindfulness is the answer to everything. It's not the end all answer. It's the beginning. It's the starting point. Because without awareness, we stay stuck. Without awareness, we continue to live on autopilot. Without awareness, we continue to go through the motions completely unconscious of ourselves, the people around us, our needs, our emotions, even understanding our thoughts, understanding our sensations in our body. So at the most fundamental level, it's got to start with awareness. Now, the hard part with awareness, and especially I know when you talk about this man box culture, I'm going to talk a little bit about parenting, but one of the hard parts about awareness is when we start teaching awareness, one of the things that comes up a lot for people is shame. Mm-hmm. Because as we start pointing out these patterns, it's like, oh shit, I do that. And then the shame spiral will kick in, which makes it really hard to stay connected to the very emotion we're trying to give space for. So if at any point in today's topic, you're beginning to feel that, oh shit, this is me, the immediate reaction to that is like, I don't want to deal with that because that's hard. That's painful to acknowledge. And yet that's the very root of the perpetuation of these cycles, is that we stay disconnected from what's hard to feel or what's hard to face. Mm-hmm. So we've got to be willing to have the courage to sit with what's hard and to be able to lean into this emotion with curiosity to say, wow, I'm noticing this resistance. Can I just sit with that? I'm noticing this discomfort. I'm noticing this sensation that makes me feel icky and I don't want to have to touch it with a 10-foot pole. And yet the irony is not acknowledging it doesn't make it go away. It only makes it worse. And we have the perception if I just ignore it, I won't have to deal with it. And I think that's where a lot of men stay within this man box culture in their marriages, is because they're like, well, I don't see it as a problem. It must not be that big of a deal. And yet it's because it's hard to face. It's hard to sit with. Mm-hmm. And even when you have awareness, doesn't mean it's always easy to do. I mean, we have plenty of examples of how we communicate where it's still like, I don't even know how to enter into this because this is hard. This is icky. This might bring up embarrassment or shame or anger or sadness or fear or old cycles of old patterns from our childhood or our previous marriages. Like there's layers to what come up for us. Mm-hmm. So, but I always say you can't change what you're not aware of. And at the root of mindfulness, it's awareness. And it's awareness of what's arising. And when I say what's arising, it's your thoughts, it's your emotions, it's the sensations in your body, and then having curiosity to say, oh, wow, look at that. That's interesting. Look what's coming up for me right now. And then having the compassion for, okay, this is all coming up for me because I'm human. Nothing is wrong with me for feeling what I'm feeling. And when I can stick with awareness and curiosity and compassion, I have a better armor to be able to sit with what's hard and be able to take it to those next steps of, okay, well, now what do I do with this? So I define mindfulness as living with greater awareness, attention, and intention. And it's paying attention to what are the typical habits and patterns that I normally employ when those things come up. Because like we said, we often just want to resist it. We want to push it away. We want to push it under the rug. We want to ignore it, deny it. And ultimately, we even judge ourselves for what we're feeling. Mm-hmm. And the last piece of that is having intention. And for me, intention is living with conscious action of knowing, why am I doing what I'm doing, which is often based in our value set, and this is something I talk about a lot with clients. Anytime you get into a conflict with somebody, anytime you're feeling angry or even enraged, or even if it's a small disconnect in a relationship, oftentimes at the root of that, there's a misalignment of values coming up. Because when we can stay values driven, we can easier live within our intentions. And so it'd be curious for you to pay attention to when you get, caught up in some sort of difficulty. And right now, all this unjust in the world, it's a huge value violation of our conflict. I said that wrong. It's a violation of our values, which is highlighting why we're in conflict.
Well, let's give an example of that just to bring it down and make it more concrete. I mean, a really concrete example is, and forgive the sexism of the example, but the husband's out at work, the wife's home on Friday night. She's waiting for the husband to come home so they can go out to dinner, a nice romantic, date night. The husband comes home a half hour late. She's upset because he's now a half hour late for their dinner. And there's two values that are in conflict there. One is our relationship from her vantage point, the importance and sanctity of our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
His value is, well, I was trying to provide for the family. There's nothing wrong in those two values.
Mm-mm.
Those are two solid values, but you're just rank ordering them at different levels. And so I think when you can get to that conflict, or when you can identify that conflict, it really helps. The other one that comes to mind right now is the, valuing the health of the community or the world in the COVID-19 thing versus valuing Black Lives Matter. Which one are you putting above the other? It's just a values conflict. And both of those values are good values, I would argue.
Yeah. And I think it's a really important thing to be able to get curious about what your values are. And there's a lot of different exercises, and perhaps we can provide some resources. At the very least, your values, it's such a hard practice because it's so simple and it's so hard at the same time. But when we can understand the most important things that we either want to attribute to or find high importance in our lives, whether it's the value of family, value of communication, value of safety, security, growth, love, acceptance. I mean, there's hundreds of values, but you can often find what's most important to you and group it into certain categories that, they might fall under. And when you can understand your values, it becomes a nice barometer for you to engage in this mindful awareness, because you're able to tap into what's arising right now and understand oftentimes your conflicts that are inside of you. You're struggling with, how do I make sense of this?
Mm-hmm.
How do I communicate this? The value of my relationship is so strong, and yet the value that I'm experiencing in, communication within myself is difficult.
Mm-hmm.
There's layers and layers, and I probably am starting a whole big bag that we don't have time to go into today. But what I wanted to, kind of bring it back around to relate to John's man box culture is so much of parenting. Because if we can live within awareness and attention and intention and values in our parenting, then we begin to shift how our kids are being raised. And if it can start to shift in the home, then we can help counteract when our kids are getting these messages outside of the home, right? Because then they're going to get a good values lesson, and they get to learn, wow, I'm getting one message on the playground, one message at home. Let me have some greater awareness of what's important to me. So you're teaching them some value systems. So ideally, if these, little boys are being raised within these man box culture rhetoric, they can understand, well, that doesn't feel good for me. How can I learn to fight against that a little bit?
Yeah, and I think one of the things for fathers to consider, for those that are listening, is to allow your sons to feel whatever they're feeling without judgment. And I've talked to a lot of dads in the past, and they say, well, I never said anything like, stop being a pussy, or, stop crying, or, big boys don't cry, that kind of thing. And that could be true. And at the same time, we might be giving them nonverbal cues, like a quick show of disgust, or turning away in a little bit of annoyance, or being impatient with them, or short. And so just be aware and be curious. And again, this is not to shame any of us, because we've all done it. So we're all in it together. I think what we're trying to do is increase awareness and then change our behavior based on that.
So I'm going to add something to what you just said, and I'm going to extend it to not just dads of boys, but parents of kids. Because
are you saying I was sexist right
there? A little bit, yeah. So it is so easy for parents to shut down their kids' emotions because it's painful to see someone you love in pain. And one of the easy go-to responses when a kid's upset or hurt or sad is to say, oh, honey, it's going to be okay. Don't worry. Now, the problem with that is, you've completely missed the opportunity to emotionally and empathically and compassionately connect with what your child's actually feeling. And you've told them not to worry, but the last thing they're going to do when you say don't worry is actually not worry. And to say it's going to be okay, you don't even know it's going to be okay. What does be okay mean? Because what might be okay for me might be different than be okay for them. So, but parents often say this because they don't know what to say, number one. They want to take away their child's pain because it's painful to see someone you love in pain. And they want to offer them a quick solution to tidy up their emotions and get going with whatever they have to be doing.
Well, and it's funny because I talk a lot with men about this, right? Given the question of, if your wife is venting to you after work, stop her, ask her the question, hey, honey, I really want to support you. What's the best way to do that? Is it A, just listen, B, give you a hug, C, try and fix it? And normally what you'll get from your wife is, I just want you to listen. Mm-hmm. But then we have another issue where we try and listen, but because our wife or our partner is in pain emotionally, it makes us uncomfortable. We get uneasy and we want to just squash that shit. And so, I think one of the big practices is just being able to sit with your own discomfort when you're picking it up from whether it's your wife, spouse, partner, or child. That's a really important practice right there.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I will teach parents to do is to simply help name and acknowledge what's going on for their kid. Because what we have the ability and I think responsibility to do is to teach that emotional awareness. And there's a couple things I want to say about this, but to start off, there's a really amazing book that was written back in the late 60s by a doctor named Dr. Chaim Ganat. And it's a book titled Between Parent and Child. And he was really revolutionary at the time of shifting how parents communicated to their kids. And it was kind of after the parenting paradigm of do as I say, not as I do, and kids should be seen and not heard, which completely shut kids down and didn't value kids' emotions and emotional experiences as valid or real. Oh, they're just a kid. What do they know? So no wonder we get this man bucks culture because they were told it doesn't matter what you feel. You're not an adult. It's not, it's not important. So Chaim Ganat was someone who was quite revolutionary in shifting this communication to children. And at the root of it was really this mindful awareness because it was allowing, honoring, and accepting what was arising without judgment. And the more we can allow our kids to feel what they feel, the more they have permission without the shame. Now, it might be hard to do on the playground, but at least they can start by doing it in the home. And the more they can practice it, the easier it is to name more than three emotions and be able to access and then hold emotional expression as a higher value, right? So one of the examples that is in the book is something so simple of a kid coming home upset. And it's kind of what I said earlier, but I'm going to say it in a different way. Coming home upset that a field trip was canceled because of the rain. And the parent just says, oh, honey, don't worry. You'll get to go again tomorrow. It won't rain then. And again, we're so quick to solve it that we completely bypass the opportunity for emotional connection. And a new way to say that would be, wow, honey, you must be really bummed. I know you were really looking forward to that field trip. It's so hard when things get canceled, isn't it? Now, part of the challenge is parents are uncomfortable just leaving it at acknowledging the discomfort. It brings up their own discomfort because they don't want to have to feel what's hard. And yet there's such value in allowing that to be the very opening into deeper emotional connection. I often tell parents, stop talking because they continue to miss, again, those emotional connections and opportunities to have even just a teaching moment. And sometimes I'll just default to my kids and just say, oh man, growing up is so hard. And just leave it at that. Allow them to feel this is hard, this is painful. And again, this is mindfulness because we're honoring, allowing, and accepting and giving space for and having awareness of what's arising in each moment without judgment, without shame, without ignoring it or denying it or resisting it. And the more we can do this, we raise emotionally aware children. And, I had a conversation recently with a client whose child was acting out. And so if I say what I'm going to say and it brings up some shame, I advise you to just sit with what's coming up and not have to push it away. But this is a really big piece that parents often will cry. And I have to say, with, a lot of compassion, I love the emotional expression that comes up when I have this conversation with parents, because it shows me that I'm touching a heartstring that has brought a new level of awareness to their parenting. So it's not about shame inducing, it's about awareness, and using that awareness to incite some really meaningful change and growth. But oftentimes what happens is when kids are acting out, parents get reactive. And as the kid gets louder in their behavior, what do the parents do? They get louder in theirs, and it becomes this hierarchical battle. And they fail to be curious and compassionate to the emotion driving the behavior. And they give the child a consequence and tell the kid, go to your room and think about what you've done. But an 8-year-old boy with ADHD, what kind of instruction is that? All they've known is that they have been, quote, abandoned and rejected for feeling the emotion they feel, because the parent is struggling with managing their own emotion around the kid's negative behavior. So a couple of things I want to point out here. There's always, and this goes for couples and spouses and partners and coworkers and bosses, but I'm coming to it from a point of children in this point. There is always an emotion driving a behavior. And oftentimes, the bigger an outburst of a behavior is a bigger emotion that they don't know how to deal with underneath. So think about if they had the ability to name and acknowledge the emotion that was driving the behavior, the need for acting out wouldn't be there, because they'd have the freedom to say, Mom, I'm so angry right now. I'm so jealous that my best friend got, that new device, rather than having a tantrum and throwing their phone across the room. I mean, it sounds silly, but these are the things that go on. So the first point I want to make is, if parents can, and again, this goes for partners and spouses as well, this isn't, but sometimes it's harder to see this in your partner, it's easier to see in your child. If you can have the ability to momentarily pause on the negative behavior, or pause on reacting to the negative behavior, and come at it from the emotional awareness and say, wow, honey, I'm noticing you're really angry right now. Now, if you were to say to a kid, why are you doing that? Why did you do that? What's wrong? They don't have the emotional awareness to name why they did that. All they know is something inside of them is feeling off.
Or the other great question is, what were you thinking? I don't know.
Yeah. And if a kid is acting out and a parent says, why did you do that? And a kid goes, I don't know. That pisses the parent off more, because they're assuming that all of their actions have been logically thought out. And so I want to remind you, there's always an emotion driving a behavior. If we focus on the behavior, we fail to acknowledge the emotion and then teach the kid what to do with that emotion otherwise.
Well, and understand that response of I don't know by your child can be an honest response.
That's accurate.
They may not actually know.
They're not being little assholes when they say that, as many parents feel. Right?
I can't believe you just said that.
Well, but I hear parents saying my kids are being little assholes.
I love it that you said that. I always swear. She never swears.
So understand that the answer of I don't know is actually honest. So let's get curious. So what I find is, if you were to ask a kid, why did you do that? Or some open-ended question, they're not going to know. But they do know what they're not feeling easier than they know what they are. So let's get curious. Okay, so I'm wondering if you're feeling tired right now. No, Mom, that's not it. Well, okay, I'm wondering if you're hungry. No. I'm wondering if maybe you are jealous that I took Sally out for ice cream and you didn't get to come. And then they'll kind of get sad. And I find that when you start to hit the nail on the head with enough questions and inquiry and curiosity, they'll either get quiet, and because that means, yes, you've kind of gotten closer to X marks the spot, or they'll actually say, yeah, maybe that's what's going on. So understand, if you can do this for your child, you are role modeling self-inquiry, which is the basis of understanding emotional awareness.
And I think one of the important studies to throw in here also is a story done at UCLA a while back that found that just by putting the right emotional label on what you're feeling, it dials down the intensity of the feeling. And that's a big deal.
It's huge. So that first part of it, that the parenting piece, is understand the emotion driving the behavior, pause on the negative behavior, get curious on the emotion, you're always going to get back to the consequence. But when you can understand that the emotion is driving that behavior that's inciting the consequence, your goal is to not just prevent the current negative behavior from continuing, but you actually want to prevent it from happening in the future. Too many parents fail to see the bigger picture of what am I actually trying to teach my child? I'm trying to teach my child not to act out, not just to shut up in this moment.
Oh, can I jump in there too?
Please.
I don't know where we are in time, but one of the things you want to do as parent, let's say your child really acts out and triggers you and you get angry. Have you ever done this where you're so mad at your child, they're like, you say something really stupid, like, you're never going back to grandmother's again, or you're grounded for a year. Well, one of the things we really want to work on is giving the smallest possible consequence we can to our children to leave a bit of a sting. We want them to feel it, but we want it to be short. Because if it goes on too long, A, you're just punishing yourself, but B, they forget why they're even being punished. And so it loses effectiveness. So keep that in mind, keep that in your back pocket, because we all get triggered as parents by our kids. That's okay. But if you're getting really mad, give yourself a timeout and just say, you know what, I got to talk to you about this later. Like, I'm too upset right now.
So there's two things I want to add to that. And then I've got one more point, and then I think we'll wrap up, because I could talk about this stuff for hours and hours and hours, but I want to be succinct. I was once at the airport sitting at the terminal waiting to get on a plane, and there was a 3-year-old who was running around, which he wasn't bothering anybody. I kind of actually thought it was good he got his energy up before getting onto the plane. Mm-hmm. The parent was so triggered by him running around the terminal. The parent was like, if you don't stop running, I'm taking away your iPad on the plane. And I thought, who's that one actually going to punish, the kid or the parent? Because the parent,
all the people around the child on the plane,
right? The parent actually needs the kid to be quiet. But yeah, it's so in that it all starts with mindfulness. I want to give an example of something that I used to do when my kids were young that I can honestly say, I've got 14 and 16-year-old daughters. We never, and by never, I will say, okay, maybe 1% of the time, and John can attest, like, we don't yell, we don't argue, we don't fight. I don't have this hierarchical, I'm the mother, that's why mentality or relationship. And I have shifted my entire dynamic as a mom that has now shifted the entire culture in my home by how I choose to respond and not to react to what's going on with them. That's not to say I don't get triggered. That's not to say I don't get annoyed and I don't get frustrated. It's a matter of how I respond, not react to it. So I remember this one night years ago, it was just me and the girls, and they were probably 7 and 9 years old, and it was bath time, and they weren't getting in the bath. And I started to get really pissed, and I was tired, and I was tired of doing it alone, and I was frustrated, and I just wanted them to get in the bath. And I started to raise my voice. And I had that meta awareness where I could like see myself raising my voice. And I said, okay, you guys, you know what? I'm really frustrated right now. So look, I named my emotion. I'm beginning to feel like my blood is starting to boil and my heart's racing. Okay. I named what was my sensation in my body. So not only am I naming it for me to dial down my own emotional reaction, but now I'm role modeling to them by proxy to teach them how to do this for themselves. So I started to yell. I stopped. Wow, you guys, I'm really getting frustrated. I feel like my blood is starting to boil, and it's really hard because this is just not working right now. And I'm afraid if I keep yelling, I'm going to say something I don't mean. And it's also not going to solve the problem of getting you guys in the bath. So I'm going to take a minute and I'm just going to pause. And I literally said this in front of them. And I literally put my hand over my chest and I just took a few deep breaths. Again, doing so, I calmed down myself. I calmed down my own brain, my own body. And I'm now role modeling to them that they can do the same when they feel reactive. I took a few deep breaths. The whole culture in the bathroom shifted. Everything calmed. And I'm like, okay, you guys, what do we need to do to get in the bath?
It's funny thinking you have a bathroom culture.
We do. At least we did when my kids are little. But this is a shocking way of parenting for many parents because it makes them feel that they lose control by stop being reactive or by not raising their voice or feeling in power. And in fact, I gained more power by being less reactive. And I role modeled and taught throughout the process this emotional awareness, naming the emotion, what was happening in my body, So the one last thing I want to say about parenting is, this is the part that often parents feel some shame around. And again, it's not about inducing shame. It's about inciting awareness of how we can start shifting patterns and cultures and language. But oftentimes, like we have that child who acts out that negative behavior. The parent gets reactive. The kid gets more reactive. It's this hierarchical battle of who's going to win. The parent's always determined to win. The kid's always determined to win. You then get really pissed off when the kid screams, "I hate you. You're the worst mother or dad ever." And you're also still haven't stopped the negative behavior from happening.
Sounds like arguments between couples too.
You're emotionally disconnected. So I want you to imagine for a moment that you're having an emergency. And I came up with this analogy years ago, and I think it's spot on. So imagine you're having an emergency and you call 911 and you get on the phone and you're screaming out of fear and anxiety on the top of your lungs, "Oh my God, the house is on fire," whatever your emergency is, and you're screaming onto the phone. Could you imagine if that 911 operator responded to you in the same or higher level of intensity in which you called? So imagine that 911 operator goes, "Holy shit, oh my God, get out of the house," like whatever they would say. What would you do if that's what your 911 operator said?
Panic more.
You'd freak the shit out. Your anxiety would increase, your heart rate would increase, your activity would get higher, your emotions would get completely flooded. You'd lose all access to the tools to calm yourself down.
It creates that negative downward spiral where it just gets bigger and worse and more louder.
So here's the issue, you guys. Parents are doing this to their kids, and partners are doing it to their partners all the time. But that 911 operator has been designed to stay calm. They've been trained. You don't even have to see them for their calm to calm you down. So I want you to be aware, right? If mindfulness all comes back down to awareness, be aware of when you're being the 911 operator or not, and let that 911 operator model be what drives you of being more present, more aware, more compassionate. Because we are constantly reacting to the strong emotions of people around us in a way that makes it all worse.
I think that's a good note to end on.
Yeah, let me just say, this is not a shift that happens overnight. It takes practice and practice and practice. It takes awareness upon awareness. And just because you've maybe started down the route of reacting or continuing to shame around the emotions of your child or your partner, maintaining that man box or emotion box culture, if we expand it to be on boys, because we shut down emotions all over the place. Just because you might start doesn't mean you have to finish that sentence. Just like how I started to raise my voice in the bathroom, and then I was like, oh wait, just because I started doesn't mean I need to continue. That's awareness. And you can make that shift every single moment. Like, that's what I love about mindfulness, because every single moment is a new opportunity to be present, to respond, not to react, to name what's arising, to acknowledge with compassion and empathy and curiosity, to just breathe.
So, I mean, this whole summit has been an incredible, to me, awe-inspiring production. I was really, really flattered and grateful that 28 experts came together at the drop of a hat to support us and to support you and to support the world in kind of sharing their best tools. And, I want to say also, well, let me ask you, where can people get a hold of you if they're interested in learning more or working with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. I just want to say too, before I answer that, so many people have reached out to just say thank you for what they received from this summit. And it's been amazing to work with John in this. So I just want to say thank you, because this has been an amazing growth of our partnership and our business relationship on every which level. And it's been very humbling to be a guide for all of you guys in creating this space. So I just wanted to acknowledge that as well.
Yeah, it's gone as well as it possibly could have.
Yeah. So it's the best way to find me is my website, joryrose.com, JOREEROSE.com. It is there that you will get access to all my social media outlets. my online courses, my podcast. I am going to be starting a membership soon in which you can work with me monthly on these tools of implementing mindfulness and meditation into your everyday life. I've got an online course, a big mindfulness online course that's in production right now. I don't say it lightly when I really believe mindfulness is the answer to everything, because all these amazing speakers, there's a common thread that weaves through all of it. And unless we get present and we slow down and we increase awareness and compassion, then nothing can change. Mm-hmm. And the entire intention of this summit was to go from surviving to thriving. And I got some kickback at certain points throughout the summit. Isn't surviving enough? Yeah, it is. And don't get me wrong, surviving is enough. And there's a way that we can get through with a little greater ease and compassion when we increase our awareness.
Well, and that was the whole focus of traditional psychology for 100 years, was how do we take broken people and get them to go from miserable to surviving? And if we got you to surviving, we were done. That was a success. And with positive psychology coming along in the last 20, 30 years, it's how do we get from miserable to surviving to thriving? And I think it's the best possible goal that we could have for this lifetime and for our loved ones.
Yeah. So just to finish off, I do work with individuals on helping implement these tools of mindfulness to create change, because everyone who comes to me says, I'm stuck and I want to move forward. And again, mindfulness is the framework and the tool set in which I guide people to get them unstuck from whatever's not working. So that also is a possibility. John and I do couples work with this, in which we work in conjunction with John doing a lot of education to the men, because sorry guys, I hate to say it, but you need to step up, because the women have been evolved to understand the emotional needs of a relationship. Men haven't been taught that socialization. And John is amazing at teaching men these skills. And we've had couples we've worked with where I have to say, honestly, I've worked with couples for years that was creating great awareness, but not the shift yet. And then when the man started working with John individually, all of a sudden it broke open the floodgates of awareness to actually take what I was teaching and put that into use. So that's an amazing thing that we can also do with couples, because couples are struggling. It's really hard.
Yeah.
And
well,
so
if marriage has a 50% success rate.
Yeah. And just because the 50% aren't getting divorced does not mean they're happy. So that's a weird statistic to fall back on.
When I got married, I don't recall thinking I've got a 50% chance of success at this. Mm-mm. It was undeniable. Like mine was going to be successful. Why wouldn't it?
Yeah. So John, where could people find you?
Well, the other thing is just to, if you want to work with us as a couple, there is the ultimaterelationship.com, and there's couples coaching packages there. So you can work with both of us together. And I really think that's the best chance of success, because a lot of this is simply learning relationship tools to be better in relationship. And if you're open to it, if you're willing, if you're motivated, man, there's nothing you can't learn.
Well, and one of the values that I think, we can bring to the table is we put these tools to use all the time. We had an emotional conversation about 20 minutes before this video recorded. In full disclosure, like we are not immune from any of the things anyone else is in managing their emotions and in their relationship. And I would say the majority of the time we're able to access these tools, but we're also going to be honest and say when it's still really hard, because that's the tricky part too. And that's where I value our authenticity in doing this work together as a couple, but together as guides in the clients we work with, because people need to know I'm not alone. Mm-hmm. People need to know nothing's wrong with me for being stuck. People need to know, can I still be in love with my partner even when we continue to get stuck, and know that there's hope it's going to move forward. We're here to say yes.
Yeah,
like emphatically, yes, yes, yes. So, yeah.
Okay.
So how can where can people work with you?
So if you're interested in working with me individually as a man doing coaching to learn more emotional awareness or anger management or stress management or positive psychology and happiness, you can visit guidetoself.com. There is also the Evolved Caveman, which is related to my podcast more so, which is about coaching men to success and happiness at work and at home. Because if you don't have all four, in my opinion, you've got none of them. The only other one is webangermanagement.com. And that's primarily to do with anger management. About 14, 15 years ago, I created an online anger management class to get these tools out there. I thought to men, but it turned out there was a lot of angry women out there as well. Who knew? And I'm very proud to say that over 10,000 people have gone through that anger management class since then. And it's, to me, it's one of the things I'm most proud about, because I feel it leaves a small dent in making the world a better place for all of us.
A happier place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks you guys from the absolute bottom of our hearts for participating, for sharing your feedback, for sharing the summit with your friends and your colleagues.
For being open to learning.
Yeah. And here's to your health and your safety in this crazy, uncertain time in our world, and in your growth and your awareness and in your thriving relationships, because at the root of it, without connection in our lives, it makes all the rest really hard. So
here's to the next time we see you, because my guess is there will be a next time.
Yes. All right. Be well.
Bye-bye. To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat. Visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.